Good afternoon. Robert Rodriguez, Chairman of Security Innovation Network. Round two. We're going to talk about new models, collaboration, as we spoke briefly earlier about the formation of Office of Strategic Services, CIA, et cetera. The intelligence community has been using or partnering with academics for many, many years. I think there's a great opportunity for those involved in the world of cyber to continue those type of models and collaboration to advance the security field. If you think about your very bright people at the greatest institutions here within the United States, Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Georgia Tech, et cetera, and then the industry and the government trying to protect their networks, their brand, their reputation, the warfighter, et cetera, and they're good at what they do. But I'm very, very strong advocate and believer in partnering and bringing in the practitioners with the theorists. I believe that's where you can create your centers of excellence. And I'll let John Mitchell a little bit later, talk about the experience that we had when I was in the Secret Service, when our agents came into a meeting and said, this web spoofing thing, this is 8-9 years ago, it's going to be a big, big problem. And look where we are today. We were able to get a grant from DHS at that time and have a think tank of industry government folks, and 9 months later, SpoofGuard was born and put into the infrastructure at eBay. I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Steve Elephant, Chief Information Officer of Heartland, Melissa Hathaway, Harvard University, former Senior Director, Cyberspace, National Security Council, General Michael Hayden, former Director of NSA and CIA, Dr. Doug Mon, Program Manager, Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology, and Dr. John Mitchell, Professor, Stanford University, Computer Science Department. First question goes to you, Doug. Earlier this month, auditors from the Government Accountability Office stated the government does not have a prioritized national cybersecurity research and development agenda. Officials don't have the ability to track all active and completed cybersecurity programs, and a process to sufficiently share key information between government and industry. The report went on to state, without a current national cybersecurity R&D agenda, the nation is at risk. That agencies and private sector companies may focus on their individual priorities, which may not be the most important national research priorities. The lack of a national agenda makes it more likely that programs won't reflect national priorities, important decisions will be postponed, and agencies will lack overall direction, according to the GAO. Doug, do you agree with this assessment? And if so, what steps do you recommend that will improve upon the current state of affairs with this issue?
Well, for the most part, yes, I do agree with the statement. The GAO came out. The last real national research agenda that was articulated came out of the Bush White House in 2003. And we have been working on some of the things there that were in the R&D agenda of 2003. But just as Deputy Secretary Lute mentioned this morning, I think we're still lacking that national agenda that says what's important, what are our priorities. There have been roadmaps that have been developed, agendas that have been developed. DHS S&T, in fact, put its own agenda out there earlier this year, but it's not necessarily a national agenda. So I think on Howard Schmidt's plate is, in fact, to do a national agenda, and that agenda is also supposed to include the R&D pieces of it. As for the tracking, that is the case. Agencies do R&D, and some agencies are better at publishing their results than others. And we also have the issue of classified research versus unclassified research. But I think The GAO was very critical of the government. I co-chair an interagency working group, and we are in fact having those discussions about tracking and making information more openly available. There's also the issue you have to ask yourself, which is, if we if we publish everything we're doing, is that also a good thing as well? So that discussion has been happening, but I'm a firm believer in accountability and transparency. While those are popular words of this administration, I think they're absolutely necessary from a research and development perspective, because that will also provide the bridge to partner with private sectors. If they know and understand what the research community is doing, they'll be in a better position to partner with us to help take that into a commercial marketplace.
Thank you. Same question over to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Robert. During the Bush administration, the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative, CNCI, there was Initiative 4, which was looking at how does one track all of the different research and development programs across the government and start to bin them so you can do portfolio management. What are we working well at and what are we not looking at? And we looked at where were all the research initiatives across the government from the 2003 agenda and then the 2005 National Information Technology Research and Development Council, the priorities that they had looked at from the President's Science and Technology Advisory Council, PCAST. And with that, there were 10 priorities for information technology, many of which have been carried forward under Doug's roadmap that was published in November at DHS. And what we found when we did the catalog in the 2008 timeframe of the over $4 billion of information technology research per year, we were only looking at and investing in 3 out of the 10 priorities. And so it showed the importance of rebalancing the portfolio towards the national priorities. I think that the GAO report is true, that we need to have a more focused research agenda going forward. And with that, we have a number of initiatives that have been announced by the Obama administration for smart grid, health IT, next generation air traffic control, broadband to America, just to name a few. But they're not actually focused toward a national economic infrastructure roadmap of how do we modernize them as they're all moving toward the internet and what are the security needs. And so if you start to look at what is that infrastructure roadmap and you start to track what all of those different piece parts are going into, I think it would help focus the administration's research and development initiatives and help us work more with the private sector and academia.
Thank you. Over to you, Professor Mitchell. Some have said that our nation has dropped the ball on translating science into innovation. A majority of research is sleeping in filing cabinets, unable to be fully realized by entrepreneurs, innovators, industry, or the government, who may be able to create value out of it. According to the National Academy of Sciences, roughly 0.1% of all funded basic research ever makes it to commercialization. With Stanford University being the #1 technology transfer academic institution in the world, what can you do, or what recommendations do you have to improve this statistic? And does it mean better licensee technology shops, more oversight, incentives, decentives? Why do some succeed and others fail?
Well, first of all, I think I'd like to be clear that I'm lucky to live in a good neighborhood, but there are many smart people all over the world, excellent universities with fine research and good innovative ideas that can be commercialized as well. From a university standpoint, there is a gap between what's funded as basic scientific research and things that make excellent spin-outs. I think in order to enable innovation, we need a research culture that values new ideas that have some application or potential impact in practice. And we need also in the research community to value evaluation of ideas that reflects either current or future deployment criteria. Sometimes these things are just absent from the review process. The research culture is more oriented towards, or in many cases oriented towards, easily evaluable things that contribute to promotion and tenure and hiring, and not everyone has a clear view at what will be useful in the long run. I personally don't think there's a difference between useful and scientifically interesting. The reason why the core basic problems are core basic problems is every time you scratch a practical problem, you reach something fundamental underneath. You know, that's my personal view. You mentioned licensing practices and so on. Some universities are more creative and take the longer view, whereas others are somewhat short-sighted. I think in order to bring a university-developed idea into the commercial marketplace, it's helpful to have a university licensing process that supports success. I know of some universities, they're university of some state, let's call it, that have asked for cash from startups before they have a product, before they have any revenue stream. I think that really just inhibits the success of that startup. If the university really wants to make money, it needs to help the entrepreneurs get started, do whatever it can, give them free licensing, give them a chance to build their company. And then, if people are successful, the university's been helpful to them. I think many successful entrepreneurs then turn around and are generous back to their university. So many places are a little bit short-sighted on that. Looking back at some of the more successful startups from our university and others, I think that students are really often the key factor. There are a few startups that are successful that have been started by faculty taking a leave and being the technology leader, but for the most part, it's students who come in, who pick up ideas from the research project, and then are willing to go out and leave and devote several years of their time to building a company. So there's a little bit of a culture supporting students to do that, and some places seem to have a better ability to do that. But if you can get students energized and give them the material to go forward, and then work with them as they go start their companies, I think that's been a successful model.
Thank you, John. Same question to you, Doug. What can we do to improve this challenge? Why do you think some succeed, most fail? And you've got some case studies, IronKey and other companies or startups that you've funded.
So I think the first thing to note is that your statistic of 0.1% of basic research makes it into commercialization. You have to look at the full spectrum of research, which is not just basic, but then applied research into test and evaluation and transition. We've been successful at DHS largely because we do the full spectrum. So while I can take John's basic research that he might do at Stanford, help them develop it into a further product. If they don't want to productize it, we, the government, have opportunities to productize it, to help them partner with industry, et cetera. So I think some of the things that are important, one is looking at the different models for funding. So if I'm an academic, I can go get research funding from a government agency, I can go look at a venture capital, et cetera, and so there are some different decisions there. If I'm a small business, one of the best programs in the government right now is what is called the Small Business Innovative Research Program, or SBIR program. We've had very successful companies that have been acquired over the last couple of years where they got their start as an SBIR. It's only available for companies of 500 employees or less, but we've had one company bought by Microsoft and two bought by McAfee, both of which all three of which have been folded into the core products of the companies, right? So it's really a matter of helping those academics and small businesses and even large businesses figure out how to commercialize. I think one of the other key pieces for us has been test and evaluation. So prior to DHS, I was at DARPA for 4.5 years and very frustrated with building technology. I funded over $200 million in research in 4 years and watching very little of it actually make it in the commercial marketplace. One of the ones that did came out of Stanford. But so we changed the model when we went to DHS, and the model now includes a test and evaluation process. So the research programs and projects have to go through a test and evaluation process. So we put them in front of the fire hose in an operational environment, either with government or with private sectors, and make sure